informational communication relative to data around complaints received by the Inspectional Services Departments, the percentage of those complaints that have been followed up on, and percentages associated with the enforcement of violations, and any other pertinent information. That was from May 14th of '24.
Through the chair, I just wanted to note quickly that we do have a report that was submitted May 14th of 2024, and I am going to ask Lee to speak to this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lee.
Good evening, Madam Chair, councilors. So the report explains a lot about our customer service request system. I would say the general answer is all of our complaints are followed up on. We don't leave any in the queue. We get a lot of duplicates from people that may call into CSRS, but also calls one of the good counselors, and so it might go in a second time. We do a lot of proactive complaints. I can speak only what comes into inspectional services because other work orders go into other departments, DPW and parks, and there's a lot of duplication in that arena as well. When some things go in as a bulk item on the street, it sometimes should go over to DPW and sometimes will come into us. So if we transfer a complaint back to where it belongs, it may hang in the balance somewhere. So I know that happens, but according to the report that we submitted, in the first period, January 2023 till December, 90% of the complaints were followed up on to either a closed or abated status. And then during the second period, the January 2024 to April 23rd, 2024, almost 80%, 77.3%. And a lot of that is because if it came in new, close to the end of April or the beginning of April, we may not have had a time to actually address it and gain compliance. The report goes on to talk about the different statuses that the complaints, when they come in as active or open, then they are assigned, then they are accepted, and the inspector has to accept them, and then they start to work on them. If they find violations, they'll put in a note, and then the status may change quickly for waiting for a letter when they actually issue an order. Then it goes to the clerks. They will create the order will then be delivered. All our orders go up by constable, so we're sure that they're getting them. Then the re-inspections can happen. Hopefully we gain compliance. If we don't gain compliance, it would go to a refer to court status, and then it goes into a different little system, housing court system, which goes over to the law office. But in our case log, you will find all this information that it's gone over, referred to court. Sometimes we get compliance before we get to court. Sometimes we don't. So we will do a re-inspection before we actually get to court, and hopefully it's settled. If not, we might go to a preliminary injunction stage, and we actually can go to a contempt stage until it's actually abated. Sometimes something is closed. I try to instruct all my inspectors to not abate something if it's only closed. So for instance, to Gage Street, we have an order out there that is sent to an owner who has now sold. So if we reissue that order, we do not want to abate that order because maybe that order wasn't ever actually complied with. We will close that order and reissue it. And our system will automatically generate that. If we put in a reason to reissue an order, a change in ownership, it'll close it rather than abate it. But our data is only as good, right, as the information going in, right? So I'm trying to keep it clean, trying to make sure people are using the right buttons to push. Right? Don't close something if it's abated. Don't abate something if we're reissuing it for, sometimes it's a time frame. We get really busy and maybe we wrote an order for an unregistered vehicle, and I'll be honest, 6 months can go by before an inspector can get back there, and maybe it's just too long to take to court, and so we may reissue that. And we have some of that, but in general, I think I have a good team. I think Buildings has a good team. We're issuing thousands of orders every year, thousands. We're dealing with thousands of complaints that don't even get an order to correct. And I think our numbers are pretty good, 90% for a year.
So just a quick question about the redundancy from different departments. Is there a way to correct that with software? Or are we looking at a new system, or is this the new system?
Well, we're using a 311 system, and we do a lot with the See, Click, and Fix, and they only have so many categories. I don't think they have one for certain things that I would like to see. Bulk item on the street or illegal dumping comes to us, and it shouldn't, and we're constantly redirecting. So I've had some conversations with Laura Cosenza, she's the director, and with Zach Whitney, he's kind of behind the scenes. And I'm hoping for some improvements. I know CSRS, Customer Service Response System, wasn't funded for, improvements, so it's working still really, really well. Property analysis is getting a little cumbersome, but we're also using other new software for analytics, building blocks. So I'd like to add more categories, but we're pretty good. I have 3 good clerks that are pretty good at directing, and my inspectors too know when they need to direct in another direction.
Okay, it just seems like if there is that redundancy, does one department think the other department's handling it, and then it gets dropped, right?
Absolutely, and that does happen.
And I know that my colleagues, I've not had the issues as much as some have, but there are reports that people are closing out before there's actually completion or action done. Have we taken a look at that?
I've seen that on occasion and have, advised against that. They should never be closing out a complaint until an action is done, unless it's a duplicate. So I did have a case where 3 times the complaint went in, and the first time it was canceled for whatever reason, and then it came in again, and then it came in a 3rd time. The inspector acted on the 3rd order, or the 3rd work order, and the 2nd one was just closed with no explanation. And so they need to put more information. I need more information than that. I have to then dig into the system to find out, well, did we do anything here? Oh, yes, we did, because there was a 3rd complaint came in. And some newer inspectors don't understand that they can work off the work order themselves. In the beginning, in training, it's like, you don't have to start a new work order, you've got a work order. So they'd close the initial one and open a whole new one to do the work. So a lot of it's in training, and we have a lot in housing, a lot of new inspectors gearing up for rental registry.
Right.
And we've had a few people leave, so we're hiring more, so it's definitely in the training. The 311 system, we talk a lot about training.
Mm-hmm. So there's still training time period an issue.
Well, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, well, we all know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'd like to request a report on those exceptions that you mentioned.
Certainly.
As to status, and how many, and what the issues are, and departments involved, et cetera.
Certainly.
All right, thank you. Councilor Bergman?
Question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair to Interim Commissioner Horn. I'm sorry I didn't get that right the first time, but I'm glad I got a second chance. The question would...
You didn't demote him.
No, Interim Commissioner Horn. So the question for me would be, and you or perhaps Lee Hall would like to answer it, is there a way through the technology that you have to separate out the violations that have to be responded to in 1 day, 1 week, 1 month? I think all of us have seen various letters that people get, which says you have list the violations, says this has to be addressed. It's a higher priority, I'm assuming. It's a public safety issue, so it has to be addressed quicker. Some of them are really quick, a week, a day, and some of them are 30 days. Is there a way in your system to separate out the degree of response time needed for the violations that are issued? I don't know if I explained that correctly, so let me know if you don't understand the question.
Godly.
Okay, through the chair to the counselor. Some violations are automatically assigned a timeline, and according to the code, some of them are. So no heat, no hot water, anything extreme, anything that's a condition to endanger should be issued on an automatic 24-hour violation. And in our system, it'll address it as such. However, when the inspector is doing their work on the computer, they have the ability to pick the timeline. Some things are automatic, like I said. Anything for an extermination is always going to be on a 72-hour. The nuisance violations also have certain timelines. Again, we have the ability for an extreme case of an overflowing dumpster with raw garbage to put on a 24-hour violation. Typically, for nuisance violations, they're 5 days. So for trash or overgrowth, it's a 5-day. Unregistered vehicles, 7 days. Those are in the ordinance. But there is a general provision for a 24-hour for anything that's extreme.
So I don't mean to interrupt, but is it possible through the chair, not today, of course, but in the future, to delineate by some report what percentage or what number of violations fit the category of needing to be responded to in 1 day and what they were versus 72 hours worth? Because to me, and it's just me, I'm just speaking for myself, I think I'd have a good sense of the types of problems we have in our housing stock if I had a sense of like 90% of them have to be responded to in a day or 3 days or 5 days versus 90% of them, I'm just picking a number, don't have to be responded to for 30 days because they're not life-threatening. So to me, that's helpful, but only if your system allows you to do that. I can't ask you to do something manually. So is that possible? Because in the future, I may ask for such an order, or maybe the chairperson wants to ask an order, but to me, that's a really good way. I know it's not an absolute, but nothing is. It's a really good way to measure what kinds of problems you guys are responding to and how severe they are.
Through the Madam Chair to the Counselor, I do believe I could run a report to separate out types of violations which should trigger the timelines. I think I could.
Thank you.
All right,
Madam Chair,
yes.
can I make a comment through
course.
the council, through the chair to the council? So I just wanted to follow up. So to that, so there are a number of orders too that the building code dictates. You know, we send out a imminent danger of collapse. That's a 24-hour notice that goes out. Often could never be complied with. But the severity of the situation demands that type of response from the owner, that we need something to happen in 24 hours to make safe or make safe or remove or make safe. To answer your question, so the inspectors too also, you know, inspectors you'll see orders 7 days, 30 days. I think some of the inspectors try to give people a decent amount of time. Sometimes it doesn't work out on these because each one of those time frames aren't definitive to that order going out on that day. Yes, maybe the inspector doesn't see it, and it goes out and he says, you got to repair the deck in 24 hours, and we all know that can't happen in 24 hours is another example, and I think that's what you're leading to, with, I'm presuming, with respect to the time to get some of these things done. But that being said, they reach out to us. We often give people ample time over and above the 7 days, 24 hours. That time frame, the inspectors and us as departments, both of us, Lee and I, we have all the power in the world to control that through the court. We can, you know, we can continue a case for months. In some cases, it takes months. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my last comment on it is I understand there's some flexibility with the inspectors, but I still think it's helpful to know what is so problematic that needed a one-day response versus everything else, so to speak, with the understanding that everything else might have been given more time by certain inspectors versus, and it's not a criticism. I've worked many years with your department, and when it comes budget time, I'm sure my colleagues are the same. I'm always very complimentary because I can count on my hand the number of times somebody's told me as a constituent that they didn't think the code department was fair, because your department is always fair. Somebody might not like to see you coming, they might not like to get mail from you, but I rarely, if ever, hear them say you didn't treat them fairly. So I don't want you to assume that this is trying to be critical. It's the opposite. I think you probably give as much time as you feel you can, but I still think those numbers might be helpful sometime in the future. So thank you.
So we can do that at the chairman's order. AJ, do you have that?
I do. Thank you, Madam
All
Chair.
right, thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Anyone have any other questions? Is anybody on the line?
I have a question. Thank you.
Go ahead.
No problem. Through the chair, just two things. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when a 311 is sent, there's no, I guess for lack of a better word, or order or word, work order is not done on the weekends? Is it just usually Monday through Friday, or is it because if it's like a serious emergency?
Through the chair to the counselor, if we issue a 24-hour order on a Friday and it's not going to be delivered till Monday, in fact, anytime we issue a 24-hour order, the inspectors are instructed to call the owner and give them a verbal notice. So always, if a 24-hour order is being issued, we need to talk to somebody. Whether it's a smoke detector, no heat, no hot water, a wall that's falling, a roof that's collapsing, we need to talk to somebody.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you, because I get messages like that often. So I just worry about, or even someone puts in a 311, one of the requests, online or with their phone or a phone call. Do those get addressed as well? Like if it's a Saturday and there's an issue, do those get addressed?
During the heating season, we're on call 24 hours a day, so we have a no heat line. So for no heat, during the heating season, as soon as it gets cold, someone will answer that call. If it's a Saturday or Sunday in the summer, if it was an extreme case, Dave, Interim Commissioner Horn has addressed things like a car hitting a building, certainly someone will come.
Okay, and real quick, just one last thing. A lot of this information, unfortunately, does not get to the residents. Obviously, it goes like to the landlords and stuff like that as far as what type of inspections and stuff like that, especially with, the registry and things like that. So are you working on getting like this information, even if it's a flyer that goes to the residents, but not just the landlord, the owners? So they have an understanding of what the inspections are and what to expect, and also what's privy to them, right? So they understand, their responsibility in this as well.
Through Madam Chair to the Council, that's a very good question and observation. Right now, for the last 25 or 30 or 40 years, most of the work we've done has been complaint-driven. And if we issue a work order for a complaint, the tenants are to get a copy of that work order. They should have it. They should get a copy as well. But moving forward with the rental registry, I think that's a good, I think that's a great idea to give some advance notice to tenants. I know the landlord guide is actually listed as a landlord and tenant guide. I don't know how many tenants are actually going to be looking at that. So we could probably, we're going to be asking for consent, so we could definitely give some advance flyers or something to a tenant so they are aware of what the inspection's going to entail.
Yeah, I think it's important for them to know what their rights are as well as a resident and who they can call. I get a lot of calls of residents saying that they're afraid to make a call. And I think, if they have that flyer and they have the information of what they can call for, I think that'll help them more, and that'll help us, especially with the rental registry, and understand some of these problem areas, identify them sooner rather than later.
I agree.
The handbook that you put together, I know I've actually taken the QR code and sent it out to people, and, but again, it is combined, and so it might be good marketing to separate the two and be able to help us disseminate that information when we hear it. So that would be great. So in the form of a chairman's order, take a look at doing that. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Any other
Very good.
questions? Okay, motion to file this report?
Councilors Bergman?
Yes.
Ojeda?
Yes.
And Chairperson Councilor Toomey.
Yes, I want to